Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Kingdom Recon podcast. I feel like I'm stealing a little bit of Garrett's thunder. That's usually how. Welcome back. I think that's your line, Garrett.
No, it's
Uh,
all yours actually. You
yeah,
you're the inventor of welcome back. I do it a
really.
little bit differently. Yeah, you got the welcome back friends trademark.
You know, you would think that This is a great intro, but you would think that I would know your intro with how many times we've done the other podcast. But
I don't
here
blame
we
you because I sometimes don't know my intro. So
yeah, here we are. It's been a minute, guys, since we've seen you. Life has been crazy. I think between myself, Randy, and Josh, we've all been rotating illnesses and some
Vacation.
traveling, and all other kinds of good things and bad things. But we're here, and we're here to give you guys an update on college football. But before we get all of that, let's go ahead and do our introductions. I am, of course, Arrowhead Tom, or you can just call me Tom, or Thomas, or whatever. I've probably been called worse either way.
big sexy.
To my left is one of our normal co-hosts, Randy Ellenberger, aka at Chief of the North. You can find him on Twitter. And down below us is not our normal co-host. It is for the second time ever on our podcast, which is pretty solid because I think this is episode 4.
Yeah.
So you're back 50%. So
He's batting 500.
He's batting 500.
are a regular at this point. Is Garrett Williams, who's also our co-host over at The Kingdom Says. You can find him on Twitter at Garrett720. Like I said, we are kind of stitched together tonight because you may even be able to hear it in my voice. I'm battling the flu right now. I know our friend Josh is under the weather, and we've all just kind of been throwing some curveballs. But we're here. We're here to give you guys an update. We have been working behind the scenes, myself, Randy, and Josh, on some wide receiver tight end conversations. We want to do that this week, but we wanted to wait till we can all three be together. So we will push that off until health has found us. So we're just going to do some general updates. We're going to check in on our preseason top 10 lists and just talk about some matchups to watch this weekend. But before we do that, as always, I'm going to take just quick 30 seconds to beg for your support. So like, comment, subscribe. Obviously, you hear that in every podcast and every video, everything that is happening, in these worlds, in the world of content creation. But yes, that helps support us. Yes, hopefully that means that, Elon Musk will send us a nice big check on Twitter. But more importantly, we want to interact with you guys. We want to interact with people who love the NFL draft, who love football, college football, pro football. If you are a fan of a team that is, for the longest time, the Chiefs, all we have to look forward to was the draft. And so, this comes from a place of we know where you've been, and it takes one draft class or one draft pick to change it around. And so we want to be, part of those conversations. We want to invite you into those conversations. So comment, follow, like, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, tell us, Garrett should wear a funny hat or I should grow hair, whatever you want to tell us. We're open to hear your feedback. So that's my 30 seconds of begging for your support. Please don't make me do it anymore. Let's start with looking back at some of our preseason lists. And Randy, I'm going to steal the thunder. I'm going to go first because my list doesn't look as nice as yours.
Fire away, man. Fire away.
I'm going to pull it up here on the screen once I find the right one. There it is. Now we've blocked out almost all of us. So let's just pretend like the Clemson linebackers aren't on the list because they haven't bothered to show up early this season either. So we can skip those guys. I think Michael Penix has been about as expected and maybe come down to earth a little bit. He's kind of a weird, polarizing guy. I think some people are like, oh, he's a top 10 pick. And I'm like, maybe not that good. But first round, early day 2, yes, definitely. Donovan Edwards, I think, has been kind of not underwhelming or overwhelming. He's just been kind of whelming. And that leaves some of the other guys on my list that I'm more excited to talk about. Let's start. I mean, the top of this list is full of big guys. Olu Fashanu right now is kind of in a debate with Randy, one of your guys, depending on who you ask, over who's going to be the top tackle in this class. And obviously that other lineman is Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. So let's start the debate, because Randy, I think you have Joe Alt as your top offensive tackle.
I do.
I
do.
Okay. So he has had a impressive season, and Fashanu has held his own. And let me pull our faces up here again so we can talk. What to you sets Joe Alt apart? I know to me it's pretty neck and neck. I give Fashanu the I think he's a little more athletic, but talk a little bit about Joe Alt's season so far.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, it's 1A and 1B with these guys. I mean, there doesn't matter who you talk to. You talk about the number one tackle in this draft, and one of these two names that is going to get mentioned. So I'm a Joe Alt guy. I mean, some of it I think maybe it's just a little bit embedded in my brain about the lineage from his dad John, that was a Chief legend for a long time. And then him being at Notre Dame, you get to see him on TV a little bit more often than some other guys. So you've seen him the last couple of years really transcend himself into being that top guy, being just a stalwart on that left side, like that he's been there for 3 years solid now. This year again, no sacks allowed. To my knowledge, I was doing as much research as I could today, trying to find any spot you could find an offensive lineman stat, which you got to dig pretty hard to find some of those things. But to my knowledge, he hasn't allowed a sack yet this year, and maybe just a couple of hurries, if anything. So when you line up against Joe Alt, odds are he's going to beat you more times than not. So I think it's just his consistency, his overall size. He has worked on his athleticism and his overall strength. I mean, you look at him and he's 6'7", 6'8". He's 330 pounds. He's a mountain of a man, and he moves really, really well for his size. And he's been doing it at a very consistent level right now. And I just think his overall experience that just kind of gives him the edge for me anyway.
Yeah. I think that's it's one of those kind of bigger philosophical approaches to the draft, right? You take the guy who might have a little bit more upside, and with Fashanu, but Joe Alt is probably a guy that you draft and you plug him in, and you're going to have a starting tackle for the next 10 years, regardless, right? I can't argue. It's like like you said, 1A, 1B. Both of these kids are having good seasons,
right?
But yeah, I mean, I think those are all good points, and I think I will even say this: I think Joe Alt has surprised me a little bit this season in terms of, like you said, being a little bit more flexible in the hips, a little bit more athletic, but just moving a little bit more smoother. And I think that goes back to him being such a technician of the game, and probably, being coached by his dad and that kind of thing. Yeah. Just being around the game of football for so long, when you know where you're supposed to be and you can get there, sometimes it doesn't matter if you're the fastest, the fastest between two guys. I'm pulling my list back up here real quick just to talk about a few more guys. So Jared Verse is one I wanted to bring up because I feel like people have really cooled off on Verse a little bit. I know last year they were talking about, if he came out, he would have been probably a top 10, top 15 pick. And then this year it seems like his play has been a little bit different. And so, Randy, I think you and I probably we'll see if I can articulate this and you can help me here. So sometimes when you have a young player and he's coming into an opportunity, his first, taste of that, they just play fast and loose, and they're just, kind of more their natural selves on the play. And then I think with, this being his second year at FSU, one, teams are caught up a little bit more, but two, he's got to think a little bit more about his, his approach to the game. There's a little bit more responsibility. I've got a pop up here for a Razor reward that I don't want. You've got to do a little bit more of that mental side. And to me, I feel like we're seeing, where a player kind of progresses, like you start, it's almost like the dip, right? You start on one side, you're playing free and fast because you don't really you know how to play football, but you don't know all your like. There's not as much that mental component, and then you have to kind of learn a little bit,
Right.
and then you end up back at the place where it becomes more instinctual and more natural. And I feel like with Verse right now, we're kind of in that dipping place where he's learning a little bit more about how to play at a higher level, and obviously, you hope that he gets to a place where he is, back to just playing more instinctual. But I think when I've watched him, and you can tell me if you disagree, it just seems like he is thinking a little bit more, which isn't a bad thing. But it seems like that's part of his development as a player is just trying to be maybe a little bit more team oriented, maybe more assignment sound, and that probably has you kind of those growing pains, I guess is what I would call it. I don't know if you've had much of a chance to watch Verse this season, or if you've had a chance.
Yeah. I mean, everybody kind of knew this season coming in that he was going to be a dude to watch. But I think part of his success last year was the overall surprise, maybe, a transfer from Albany. The competition level probably wasn't there, but he has the skill set and that raw ability. So I think last year he came in as kind of an unknown academy. We weren't sure what you were going to get with him. He had skills. He had some ability, but he came in and he flashed, and you kind of take people by surprise. Okay, well, everyone knows you're there now. You're not surprising anybody this year. So I think it's a combination of people knowing who he is now. They're going to game plan. They're going to slide a lot of protections his way. At a tight end, they're going to chip him with the back. He's going to get a lot of extra attention, which has cleared up some room for some of the other guys, like Fisk on that D line. But I think also in that learning curve now to where it kind of appears like he's kind of thinking as he's going. He's in that. I think he's kind of in that spot now to where he knows he's explosive and he's fast and he's powerful, but now he's got to have a move after his first move. Like I think right now he's trying to learn how to sequence those attacks and have a plan of attack when he's going up against somebody who's maybe just a little bit bigger and stronger than he is. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he makes up that lack of size with just sheer explosiveness and athletic ability. So I think maybe that's what we're seeing right now is that people have kind of caught up and said, okay, we know who this dude is. We're going to give him some extra attention, especially schematically when it comes to the coaching side of things. But then it is his learning curve too, to where, okay, I can't just rely on my sheer athletic ability. Now I got to start setting some things up and having a counter to my first move that I'm going in for. So I think maybe that's just kind of what we're seeing now. He's still a dude, regardless. I mean,
the athletic profile there is gonna, regardless. I think,
and while his numbers might not be blowing you away right now, that's also the fact that he's getting double teamed, he's getting chipped, he's getting extra protection. Like those things are going to happen. Like you see some of these dudes that came in as preseason All-Americans. A couple guys on my list even. They came in as that top-notch, top-tier dude. Well, now they're getting a whole lot of extra attention, or in some cases in corners and whatnot, they're just not even throwing the football your way. So your numbers are going to suck. It's going to look like you're not doing anything out there, but it's hard for you to make a tackle or break up a pass or get a sack or whatever it is when no one's throwing you the football, or you're getting double teamed and they got a tight end and a running back chipping on you all the time too. So I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Verse, but
they're pretty good at turning out this type of edge rusher, aren't they? I mean, what is it about Florida State? Because they've had a couple the past couple years, I mean, Jermaine Johnson last year, you have Brian Burns, you had, Janarius Robinson.
Right.
They kind of have a theme for edge rushers coming out of there that Verse, from what I've seen at least, kind of follows that similar trend to kind of more of a longer, lankier guy. It's very interesting to see that kind of trend coming out of FSU.
Yeah, and I think that, Garrett, that's a great point to bring up. Like, there's been some other players that have come through that program at the same position. And, there's been some flashy plays and some, obviously, Brian Burns a couple years ago was phenomenal. Some of those other guys I don't think have grown as pros as people would have hoped, but it's still a little early for Jeremiah Johnson. Is that right?
Yeah.
Jermaine, sorry.
Yeah.
Listen. I
was like your draft crush last year too. Come on.
Listen, I may or may not have a fever right now, and I probably won't remember this recording in the morning. So I'm not I'm not liable for anything that I say. I could feel the thought like boiling in my head. I was like,
it was
that's
there
wrong.
though. At least it was there. I mean, you
Yeah.
saw it in your head. There's a couple lip logos.
I'm pulling up the picture to block your face just because you corrected me. One other guy I just wanted to bring up, again, just a big guy that been a big theme. We've talked a lot about Kingsley Suamataia, but Dante Corleone, who is nicknamed the Godfather, big old boy, nose tackle. Again, not a splashy. Stats aren't going to jump off the page, but if you get a chance to watch him, I think they're playing Baylor this week. This man just moves and I say man because he does look like a man playing against boy, like just moves people, and unless he doesn't want him to move. Sometimes, if he's holding the block and he's waiting for the running back, if you're looking for that kind of guy, pay attention to Cincinnati. But let's pivot real quick. I'm going to pull Randy's list up. I know we've talked a little bit about Joe Alt. Randy, who else on your list here is standing out? Who do you want to you've got a couple guys. Like, I know you bring up your list a lot because it's like, man, Randy really got we will once again list.
I hit on some dudes this season, and it was
we won't talk about Jeremiah Trotter. We'll give you a pass.
We'll slip Jeremiah. I mean, he's finally starting to come around a little bit, but still not having the season that everybody was kind of hoping he would have. But we talked about Joe Alt earlier. But Cooper Beebe is another great offensive lineman who hasn't allowed a sack yet this season. I think at the NFL level he slips in and he plays guard. But Coach Riley up there at Kansas State, he's done a heck of a job with Cooper, and Cooper's playing some fantastic football as well. So another good offensive lineman to keep an eye on. He's probably not going to be in that top half, or even probably maybe a later first or day 2 guy, but you're going to get a pretty solid offensive lineman out of.
So you're saying he might be in the Chiefs' range?
Oh, absolutely, for an interior guy. I mean, we're pretty set on interior guys right now, but I still wouldn't. I wouldn't be mad if he ended up in Kansas City. That's for sure. He'd stay close to home, and we could handle that. We mentioned earlier, guys like Kool-Aid. You look at their stats, and it's kind of underwhelming. I think he's got 18 total tackles on the season. He doesn't have an interception yet. And he's got 4 passes defensed. So that is just kind of one of those things where everyone knows who Kool-Aid is. And we're just not going to throw the football over to that side.
Yeah.
So just another one of those outstanding Alabama corners who's super athletic and flat out just knows how to play the position. So, his stats aren't going to be gaudy, but everybody knows who Kool-Aid is for sure. One of my favorite guys still is Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. That guy is all over the football field still. In the first episode, I talked a lot about his pedigree of how dynamic he was in high school. But he's proven that at the next level that he can line up and cover anybody, and he can make an open tackle, and he can put you on the ground, and he can do pretty much anything you want a DB to do. So he's a lot of fun to watch. Josh Carty, gotta give some love to who I think the best kicker in college football is right now. He's 13 of 16 on the year. He had a couple of misses of over 50 yards against Arizona that he'd probably like to have back because they lost that game 21-20. And then he missed his first attempt against Colorado last week, but then came back and
got the dub.
Hit that one to send it into overtime, and then the game winner in double overtime. So Josh Carty's a dude. I still think he's the best kicker in college football for sure. I think one of the guys I've had the most fun watching so far is the little wrecking ball, Jerzon Newton down in Illinois. Coming into the season, probably sitting ranked, very close to, if not at the top of the interior defensive lineman list. And I think he has solidified himself there without a doubt, because he is a bad man to try to block one-on-one. And a lot of people have a problem doing that. So he faces double teams all the time, but he can shed a block. He can make you look silly. He can penetrate and play on the other side of the line of scrimmage and just kill plays in the backfield. So I'm a little surprised.
I think my expectations for him were pretty high, and he's even surpassed them. I mean, you and I talked about him before we even made these lists, and he is at time like at times looked like he was, taking over games for an Illinois program that has some good players on their defense, but as a whole, isn't nearly as talented as some of the other teams that they're matched up with every week.
Right.
But he has, almost single-handedly kept them in some games, which is a really impressive thing to do.
Yeah. From an interior line spot.
He is having an impressive year.
Yeah. I mean, it's look at the numbers. He's got 2.5 sacks totals, but his pressures, I mean, I think there was one game he had 10 or double-digit pressures, quarterback pressures in that game. He was just literally playing on the opposite line of the scrimmage and just causing all sorts of problems. So he's been a lot of fun to watch. I think he has, like I said, solidified himself as the number one interior defensive lineman in this class. And it'll be interesting to see how high, an interior defensive lineman like him goes in the draft. Another interior defensive line guy, Chris Jenkins. Another one of those instances, kind of like Kool-Aid, where everybody knows who Chris is, and everybody, there's a lot of other dudes on that Michigan defensive front, so his numbers aren't going to blow you out of the water either. He's got 16 tackles, 1 sack, and 1 pick on the year. But he is a stalwart in the middle of that line. Like, he will hold his own. He'll take on double teams to clear up everything for anyone else around him. Excuse me. But he's a first-round draft guy. He's a first-round talent as well. Like, he's just a big, strong, physical guy that can really cause some damage, especially in the interior there too. So
I need to get a chance to. I haven't had a chance to get eyes on him yet this year, even though I was hyping him up a ton before. But maybe
they shut down my Husker run game in a heartbeat a couple of weeks ago. So it was he did his job up there, and he's got the lineage too, from his dad and his uncle playing in the NFL for a long time. We'll skip Mr. Trotter. Been a little bit of a disappointment this year. But I'll finish off my list with a couple of wideouts who have really, really played well. I'm going to skip Rome real quick and just go to Corley because he's the lesser known of the two. Corley's having a fantastic year for Western Kentucky. He's actually playing right now if the game's not done. He missed last week with a hamstring. I think he had like 1 catch in that game, but the prior game, he had a heck of a game against Louisiana Tech. He had 8 catches for 207 and 3 touchdowns. So he's having himself a pretty decent season. He's the yak king. He's going to do a lot with the ball in his hands after the catch. But he plays at Western Kentucky, so he doesn't get a lot of hype. He doesn't get a lot of TV time. But he's a guy that you put in the slot, and he can cause some problems. So he's a lot of fun to watch. He's been banged up in 2 games this year so far, but which might be a little concerning with this hamstring now. But we'll see how it goes, and then I'll finish.
I'm gonna ask you real quick.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you a dangerous question. Because we don't have our Cowboys representative here this week, so we'll venture into the Chiefs world just a little bit. Obviously, one of the big conversations in Kansas City is trying to find wide receivers and trying to find more weapons to add to this offense. Malachi Corley is listed at 5'11", I think 210 is what their website has him at. Smaller school, it's kind of a smaller receiver. You mentioned playing in the slot, and this is where the question gets dangerous. How do you compare a guy like Corley to a guy like Sky Moore in terms of you were going to have to offer the offense differently?
I think their skill sets are similar. I think Malachi is a little bit more dangerous with the ball in his hands than Sky is. Everyone that knows me knows that I am not a Sky Moore fan. I was not a fan of the pick when it happened. Been a little disappointed in any kind of progress that he's made. But I think when you look at the two, I think Corley's a little bit more physical. I think he's better with the ball in his hands. And I think he looks a little bit more dependable and as kind of a go-to guy in that Western Kentucky offense. So, I mean, you can make that correlation of both coming from smaller schools and they both a little bit smaller guys and they both kind of play the same position. I like Corley way more than I would probably ever like Sky Moore.
Yeah, I was just curious because I kind of have the same one, and I say like, oh, he's a smaller receiver. I mean, if those measurements are accurate, 5'11", 210 is is pretty well built.
He's put together for his size for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And you said a physical play style that definitely plays out. And Garrett, I don't want to leave you out of the conversation. I know we have one more receiver to talk about.
Yeah.
Garrett, when you talk about looking for receivers as a Chiefs fan, here we're talking about kind of these smaller slot guys. What do you think the Chiefs need? What do you do? They need to go with a bigger body guy? Do they need to find a speedster? Do they need to find an X receiver? Replace what Juju Smith-Schuster brought? What do you think, Garrett? What kind of wide receivers should we be paying attention to?
Honestly, separation. That's the biggest thing that we need. We need guys who are quick off the line of scrimmage, who can win hand fights, who know how to kind of do the technical things close to the line of scrimmage to get open, and then really just the trust factor, of going in there, doing their work, doing their due diligence, and gaining the trust in Mahomes and the offense. Because I don't know. Personally, I feel like the Chiefs, we've never really utilized like a big body wide receiver, at least in the Mahomes era. It's you never really have a guy you just kind of throw jump balls to, like DeAndre Hopkins, you might, or something like that, a prime Julio. The Chiefs really don't utilize that a lot. Not to say that they couldn't, but that's something I think it's kind of overrated by Chiefs fans of wanting like a true X receiver. Because really, they don't get a whole lot of play in the offense. I mean, obviously, Juju last year was pretty solid in that kind of X role, but he's also a guy that definitely had a higher level of route running and separation ability than a lot of guys. So that's the biggest thing I'll be looking at, is just guys who can get open quickly, have real sudden bursts. Sky Moore, he's almost that mold in theory, but he just doesn't quite have the technicalities of like being a receiver down. I think you'd really want a guy who's into the technical aspect of the wide receiver game, especially around the line of scrimmage.
Perfect. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. I think, and we've talked about Sky before and just his play strength, and hopefully that improves. But speaking of play strength and guys who probably won't have too much problem separating, let's go ahead and, Randy, I'll let you get to your last guy here, because I know we both love this kid.
Yeah,
so I'll let you take him.
Rome has solidified himself as my number 2 wide receiver in this class. He is having just a monster year so far, and it's been a lot of fun to watch that Washington offense, and with Penix chucking the ball around. He's got 3 legitimate guys out there throwing the football too. But Rome is the king. He's sitting at 40 catches, just shy of 750 yards, I think, so far this year. 6 TDs. He's averaging 18 yards a catch. Even had an 83-yard punt return for a touchdown too. So, he's sitting at 6'3", 215 to 220 pounds. So he's a bigger, solid, athletic, big, strong, fast kid that I think can do just a little bit of anything. He's got good speed. He can jump. He can go for those 50-50 balls. He can run after the catch. He's got great shake after the catch. He can run guys over. I think he has really solidified himself to me as the number 2 guy behind Harrison in this draft. And I'd love to see him in red, Roman Arrowhead, but I don't think there's honestly any possible way whatsoever he slips past the mid-teens.
Yeah, he definitely won't be there at 32. So
it's not good. Yeah. So unless we make a concerted effort to go up and get him, he won't be there when it comes time for Kansas City to make a pick. But I can't say enough things about him. We talked a little bit just before we started recording about working on some of those body catches and some of the drops that he had maybe last year. So I think he does a much better job of catching the ball with his hands away from his body and kind of snatching it out of the air and securing it afterwards. So
I think it's been we talked about that before we went on, and that's been a huge thing for me. Just because I think there were times, and I started watching this 2022 tape, and I was like, oh, he's kind of catching with his body and some of those drops, but he just seems to be just stronger hands, and he plays. You talk about the separation and that kind of thing. He shows. I've seen a little bit more like pacing in his routes, especially when it comes to coming back to the football or getting to his spot where the ball is being delivered, and you see some of that chemistry that he's developed. With his second year with Penix as the quarterback. So Really, and like you said, all three of those guys down in Washington, fun players to watch. So I'm going to just pull up real quick in case we didn't look at this before the show, but let's pull up Josh's list, see if there's anybody. There's at least one guy on here that I want to talk about. And no, Garrett, it's not Caleb Williams.
It should be.
Yes, we know. In case you weren't aware, Garrett is our resident Caleb Williams expert. So, excuse me while I adjust my camera too. Anyways, Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia. I said it, when we talked about him beforehand. When Josh was here and put him on the list, that following kind of in the footsteps of some other Georgia tackles who have kind of played all over the line and then played tackle. He has been very promising, and I think if the Chiefs are looking for a guy again, kind of late in that first round, who they could bet on some traits, maybe come play tackle for them, and has the versatility to kind of play on either side. Has played multiple spots, which I know Andy will love. Definitely a name to watch. So, let's transition real quick. We're going to try to keep this a little bit shorter today. Let's talk about some matchups this coming weekend and some guys that we want to watch. So, Randy, I know you've got a whole list, so I'll let you lead off, and we'll jump around. And Garrett, feel free to jump in with whatever exciting list you have.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so there's some good matchups. A lot of prospects that are going to be going head to head against some pretty significant prospects on the other side of them too. But I think the big game this week obviously is Ohio State and Penn State, number 3, number 7. That should be a really tough matched, fun game to watch. That being said, hopefully both teams show up. You hope Penn State comes in with the right state of mind and plays physical and quarterback play at Ohio State stays solid, so it's a good decent matchup. But I think some of the biggest matchups in that game is going to be the Ohio State wide receivers versus Kalen King. He's worked himself into top 2-3 corners in this upcoming draft, and the wide receivers for Ohio State are no joke. Harrison is the number 1 overall ranked wide receiver by pretty much everybody, and for good reason. He is the absolute total package. But I think that's going to be a great matchup between King and whoever lines up on the other side of him. You got your boy Fashanu. He's going to go up against a couple of really good defensive ends from Ohio State, so he's going to get tested as well. And you got another one of your dudes in Chop on the other side, who still is like one of my favorite names. Like Chop for a defensive end is pretty sweet. He's going to give those tackles for Ohio State fits all day. Chop is a little undersized, when it comes to typical defensive end standards. What is he, like 6'3", 240, 250? He's not your typical
slider, kind of maybe a stand-up guy,
lengthy type guy. Yeah.
6'3".
Florida State, but
yeah. I mean, not that typical long
254.
Yeah, so a little undersized, but he's the dude's got a motor and he's got ferocious hands and he knows how to use them. So I think
athletic. As
for sure.
Penn State just turns out athletes at that position.
Yeah, he's got a great first step. He gets off the ball fast, and he's one of those guys. When we talked about Verse earlier about learning how to set up moves and do those things, I think Chop might be a little bit more advanced in that aspect of his game with the way he uses his hands. So. He's got a counter move locked and ready if the first one doesn't work out. So I think that's probably my biggest matchup there is Ohio State and Penn State. That should be a really fun game to watch.
Yeah, I mean, so there's some other big ones. Tennessee and Alabama is going to have talented players all over the field.
Yeah.
We mentioned, Michigan is playing at Michigan State. It's always a good rivalry game. So hopefully get a chance to get the eyes on Chris Jenkins. Garrett, I'm going to give you a layup here and give you a chance to talk about, your Trojans going to play the number 14 ranked Utah.
How does that happen?
They've got one heck of a defense.
Who is Utah?
They've got one heck of a defense.
I
know your Trojans are reeling a little bit, knocked off the mountain a little bit.
Listen.
They're still first in the pack, right? They took it on the chin a little bit against Notre Dame, but
they did. They did.
Always, you can't win them all, I guess.
You can't win them all. Listen, there's been a very high expectations out of the USC Trojans this year, obviously with Lincoln Riley coming over and really kind of transforming that program. We looked a little shaky the past couple weeks. We didn't look very good versus Arizona, still squeaked out a win. And then obviously Notre Dame kind of kicked our teeth in. Yeah, I know, Kyle. They kind of whipped our butt. It's a legit defense that Notre Dame's got. The Trojans' offense really hasn't been humming too well, especially against some of these better defenses that are causing the plays to break down a little bit more. And you're not seeing quite that amazing after the play breakdown ability from Caleb Williams at the moment. He's kind of in a little bit of a slump where he's getting a little happy feet. He's very uncomfortable in some of these pockets and just kind of losing the overall trust of the offense. So it's we got to adjust. You got to try to get that back. It's going to be another Pac-12 game. It's going to be a grueling one. It's probably not going to be easy. But hopefully it's a good bounce back game for the Trojans. The defense has also been lacking. The defense has also been lacking, so that's a tough one as well. We don't have too many guys on the defense this year. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they respond. I think, national championship still maybe in the hopes, but it's just this team.
Let's try to get back in the top 10 first. But
yeah, I mean, team's got some work to do. All right, it's not going to be. It's going to get worse before it gets better. We've got quite the schedule coming up as well after Utah. I know we've got both Oregon and Washington. So we're going to see. It's going to
be some big games. The Pac-12 has got a lot of draft talent for a conference. It's about
Pac-12 is absolutely crazy this year for a conference that's about to not be here anymore. A couple years,
going out in a blaze of glory for sure.
Yeah, they really are going out with a bang. I mean, this is the best Pac-12 play we've seen in at least 10, 15 years. Like this is back to like some. Yeah, this is some good play that we're seeing from the Pac-12. So.
Well,
I think it's going to be a fun game.
Yeah, I had to give you a chance to talk about your Trojans. I wanted to mention not a matchup that's got either team ranked right now. Back in my home state, in fact, I used to live in Champaign, Illinois. But back in my old stomping grounds of Champaign, we're going to get Wisconsin at Illinois. We've talked about. Keith Randolph Jr. was on my list as a big run stopper. We talked earlier about Jerzon or Johnny Newton. Wisconsin's always like they just, those corn-fed offensive linemen. They've always got those big boys up front. So it'll be good to watch that matchup. And again, I talked about Newton's ability to just kind of take over some games. It'll be interesting to see how that one goes. And then Washington, we talked a lot about.
I'd like to see Braylon Allen and Newton meet in the hole one time. I want to see
just once. Yeah,
just he's going to slip a block and they're gonna meet in the backfield. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. That should be a good slugfest, though.
Yeah, Washington's playing Arizona State, which should pretty much just be a tune-up game. So if you want to watch those receivers,
Arizona State's kind of good though. I mean, Arizona State's got some dogs on them. I'm telling you, if you're watching that game, watch for Arizona State's running back, number 4, Zach Skedaboo. I believe is his name or something like that.
Okay.
Bro is a dog. Like when he was playing the Trojans a couple weeks ago, like basically single-handed carried them to overtime. He has some amazing after contact ability. He's got some receiving ability. He'll barrel through guys. He's a pretty fun player to watch. I don't know how he'll fare versus this Washington defense, but be on the lookout for old Skedaboo.
Mm-hmm. One last matchup I'll mention because I think this might be the one that I have to go out of my way to catch. It'll be looks like a Saturday evening game, and I'm kind of surprised that it's going to be. I think it'll be an interesting game, and that is Florida State against Duke. And so I may or may not be developing a little bit of a fascination with Riley Leonard. He seems to be a fun quarterback, maybe just a college guy. I don't know. I haven't watched too much of him, but obviously we've talked about Florida State. They've got a handful of wide receivers. They've got talent kind of all throughout their roster. They're ranked 4th in the country right now. Duke could be coming in, looking to play looking to play upset a little bit. They are playing at Florida State, and there's probably going to be too much of a talent discrepancy, just as you go through the depth. But there should be some interesting players, and it should be an interesting matchup again, an ACC rivalry game.
Right.
Be good to watch, especially like we talked about the pass rushers. Leonard's got some. He's slippery back there, so
he is. He's a much better athlete than I gave him credit for going into the beginning of the season. But I think you're right too. I think there's just going to be the talent pool. I think is just too deep in Florida State, and I think if Duke's going to have a legitimate shot at keeping this close, it's going to have to be a whole lot of Riley Leonard, and him having his A++ game.
Yep. He's going to have that career defining.
He's going to have to, and they're going to have to play. They're going to have to keep Florida State's offense off the field. So I wouldn't be surprised to see, Leonard throw the ball 25 times and rush it 25 times. Like he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. But yeah, you're going to have to keep that Florida State offense off the field, but Florida State's defense is no joke either. So it might just be a little bit too much for old Duke to bite off this week, but it could be a fun game to watch yet. A lot of talent around.
Hey, if it helps, Duke played Notre Dame closer than USC did. So, boys, if there's not any other matchups that are popping off the screen to you guys, I know we didn't really make a list beforehand.
What's going on in Missouri? What's going on in Missouri?
I ask that question every day when I cross over the state
line.
Something's
going on down to MIZ, but I don't know what's going on. But I've heard some good things
I tell you what, though, man, watching Luther Burden, wide receiver from Mizzou, that dude's he's making a name for himself, and he's flying up some draft boards too because runs great routes. He gets separation. He's got good hands. He runs hard. He's probably the number one slot guy in the nation in my mind right now.
Mizzou's got some guys, and they've got some more talent incoming.
I've heard they're making a little. Yeah, I've heard some grumblings about them, so I just want to see. South Carolina.
They are. They've got South Carolina. We actually talked about him before the show. I don't think we mentioned him during. Xavier Leggett from South Carolina. That'll be an interesting one. So keep an eye on him, wide receiver.
We'll get into more of some of those guys when we get Josh back and we can get our wide receiver tight end segment.
You're right. I don't want to give away too much.
We'll leave a few nuggets out there. We'll just dangle the carrot a little bit. Just throw
you guys got to come back
for sprinkles.
You got to come back to get the rest of the info.
Yeah, so it's good. It's a good week for college football. This college football season flies by. It's easy to get lost in the shuffle.
Week 6 already.
Week 6, it's wild. So we are flying through. There are names being made and names being forgotten. So mostly the Clemson linebackers, but we're happy to keep talking draft with you guys. We are excited to get to this wide receiver and tight end conversation, and just to continue to provide draft coverage. Once again, just to remind you guys where to find us, we are at Arrowhead Tom, at Chief of the North, and at Garrett 720 on Twitter. This is the Kingdom Recon podcast, which I should mention now has its own Twitter account. You can find us over at Kingdom Recon at Twitter. Let me make sure that's right. Is it Kingdom Recon Pod? I should know our Twitter handle.
You made it, yeah.
Kingdom Recon. So we currently have 13 followers on that account, but we're going to get more of you.
We're in the infancy.
I know. So hop over there, listen. Like I said, follow, subscribe.
Start a conversation.
Yes. Yeah. We would love to argue with you guys. We argue.
Absolutely. I love to argue.
Yeah. So
please tell me why Caleb Williams isn't Patrick Mahomes more. Just please tell me.
No,
all the haters sure came out of the woodshed.
Williams crumbles under pressure. Pat excels.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I was hearing that the first 5 weeks, and all of a sudden it's like this last week, everyone came out the woodworks with their bad Caleb Williams takes. It's like, all right, guys, I get it, but let's keep that same energy on the other side of it. I'm just saying.
That's right.
If you guys got a dude, you got a dude that we haven't seen or we haven't talked about, we haven't touched on at all, let us know. We'll dig into it. We'll let you know what we honestly think. Tom might love him. I might hate him. Might go the other way around.
Just talking about over it.
Yeah.
Make sure you tweet at Garrett. Let him know why Drake May is QB1 in this class. But other than that, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for hanging out. We hope you guys have a great week, and we will catch up with you guys soon.
Later, y'all.